Okay, now we're ready to go. We are being recorded. That way this presentation will be available on demand going forward. As I was beginning to say, Ms. Muggia is a licensed therapist and clinical social worker, currently on contract with Oregon City Police Department as a behavioral health specialist. She also has her own mental health practice here in Oregon City, where she specializes in post-traumatic stress disorder, trauma, and relationship issues. She has a particular specialty working with emergency professionals and first responders. So thank you for putting this together for us and for this presentation. So go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor and a privilege. You know, I live in the Oregon City area, and so there's nothing better than be able to provide training and opportunity to my community. I really appreciate that. I also want to say thank you for having me, of course. And that this presentation, it really is 60 minutes, right? It's an hour. And we're just going to scratch the surface of the topic of conflict. And please feel free to ask questions during the presentation. I think Anne has graciously agreed to monitor the chat. So if you want to put your question in there, or if you want to raise your hand with a little hand icon, that'd be great. I don't mind being interrupted, so feel free to ask as many questions as you want. So, and I also should do a little disclaimer that technologically I'm not the savviest person. So if either I disappear or come back, that's because I'm figuring things out. But today I'm hoping that these are going to be the objective we're going to focus on, really understanding where does conflict come from, you know, understanding primary and secondary emotions and the difference between the two, special circumstances that might increase conflict. We're going to briefly touch on those, how to respond, how to diffuse a situation if it's escalating, know when to step back, and when it's appropriate to call the police. My major focus on this presentation is really going to be safety. Your safety, the safety for those around you, and also for the safety for the individual that might be upset while he's interacting with you. So really, what is conflict? If you look on the internet, if you look at definition of conflict, you can get a lot of definitions. These are the two that I like best. So one is that conflict is a process that begins when one party perceives that another party has negatively affected or is about to negatively affect something that the first party cares about, okay? And the second is the conflict happens when two or more people disagree and one of them, at least one of them, choose to make an issue of it. The reason why I said that, apologies, I'm gonna turn off this beep. The reason why I like this definition, because really it focuses on the fact that conflict is a choice. You know, people decide whether they want to engage, whether they want to make a deal out of a situation. And also it focuses on the fact that is individual, is conflict is, you might think that there is not a conflict there, but the person might, for whatever reason, because of their experiences, because of their perception. So even when you think that a situation might not lead to conflict, it is likely that it might. Just keep that in mind whenever dealing with people. And I'm going to try to do this. I apologize because my little thing was covering. So because conflict is born out of individuals and out of the emotion, I think it's important to understand the big difference between primary versus secondary emotion. Primary emotion are emotions that you're kind of born with. They're like ingrained in your brain, in your DNA. And these emotions are anger, sadness, fear, joy, disgust, surprise, anticipation, and trust. There are some variation on the name that people call, but in essence, those are your basic emotion or how you express whatever feeling you're experiencing. Now, the trick part is to recognize that these 8 emotions are often used to express other emotion. For example, frustration, shame, guilt, they often come out as fear. Grief, I'm sorry, they often come out as anger. Grief often come out as fear. So just because somebody's angry, it is worth to take the time to really understand what emotion is fueling that anger. By identifying what emotion is actually upsetting a person and has caused them to be angry, we might be able to diffuse the situation. Sometimes anger comes, I don't know if you ever had the experience that you get so so angry that you cry. You know, like the two don't seem connected, but they are. Or sometimes you might experience resentment over a situation for whatever reason, and that can turn out into anger. Sometimes the situation just reminds you of something that has happened to you that was an unpleasant situation, and that was caused anger. So it's always worth to ask the question, what can I do for you? How can I help you? Even if instinctively that's not the question that you want to ask. Now, the secondary emotion are learned emotion, okay? The interesting part about this is these emotions really are shaped by our experiences, our value, how we grew up with. So the reason why I say that is because not everybody responds to frustration the same way, or not everybody responds to resentment the same way. And that is also to keep in mind that just because you would have not responded to the situation the same way that somebody else did, does not mean that, the reason why they might have responded that way is because they don't know anything better. They have learned that to certain emotion, that's what the response is. They are reaction, secondary emotion are reaction of how we feel. And often they last longer and they're more intense than primary emotion. That's why sometimes when you're interacting with people that are really upset, their intensity does not seem to match the situation. I gave an example of somebody that got really upset because their order got messed up, or they received the food that was not the food that they ordered. And they have a very almost instinctive reaction to the situation. That should be a good indication that there's something more there. It is not just that the food didn't come out the way they wanted. There is some other underlying emotion that causing these people to respond this way. And so this is kind of a little, I'm a visual person, so this helps me a lot. It's kind of like asking a question when you're observing some confrontation going on. Does the emotion fit what's going on? Does it match the level of intensity? Is it appropriate? If the answer is yes, then we know that that's a primary emotion, okay? And so you can just talk to them and trying to calm them down. They generally have a response, but then they're like, oh my gosh, I'm really sorry. I don't know why I reacted to that. Now, if the emotion does not fit the situation, it's most likely a secondary emotion, okay? And that is sometimes a little more complicated to diffuse because sometimes the person itself doesn't understand why they're still so upset of the situation. And again, I apologize. I don't see any of you. So it's kind of having this conversation with the video makes it a little difficult. So if you have any question, again, please ask them as the presentation go on. Because I'm going to really throw you a lot of information in a really short amount. So if you don't understand something, I don't mind a question or two. Yes.
Well, I do have a question. This is Anne. So I think I understand the difference between primary and secondary emotions. But if it seems to me that someone is responding with a secondary emotion, how does that help me deal with the situation? Like, what's that? What is that a clue for me?
Yeah. So I think when somebody is responding with a secondary emotion, I think it's important to really not focus with the situation itself in the moment, but rather asking this question more to the solution, what can I do to help you? Okay. Have the person allow the person to tell you, this is the solution that I want, or even the person to be able to say, I don't know what I need. And then you can say, oh, okay, well, let's figure it out together. Rather than, if it's an angry person is talking to you, our instinct is to um, respond in anger as well. Um, I am so sorry. My beeper is going off, of course, during this presentation. So um, my apologies. Um, so the difference is that if you solved the problem that the person that you perceive the person as, but the person is still angry or is still upset, that's when you kind of want to engage in a conversation with the person and allow them to kind of explain what they need. Does that make sense? Sure. And I think another thing that we have to keep in mind is that often people are experiencing unique circumstances that increase the response and their emotional response to the situation. So things like mental illness, drug or alcohol, medical problem, lack of sleep, recent trauma, work stress, even previous unpleasant experiences with your organization, with police sometimes. Those are all circumstances that just add gasoline to the fire, so to speak. And so it might be that whatever interaction you have with the person really is the last straw, so to speak, that made the person respond in a negative manner, but there might be so much more underneath. And so again, that is important to ask this question like, what can I do for you? Is this really what is upsetting you right now? Is there anything else that I can do? And allow for the person the time to express what's going on. Sometimes when you're dealing with people who might be experiencing mental illness, their response time might be longer. So patience and really have the time to spend with them is going to make a greater difference. So if you are in a hurry or if you are trying to diffuse the situation but you really don't have the time, I always encourage you to maybe talk to a colleague or allow for somebody else that actually has the space and the time to sit with this person. Because at the end of the day, a person that might be in a conflict mode is really just trying to be heard. Um, One of the things that I want to point out is just because people are experiencing unique circumstances, it should never be a justification for their behavior. Is rather an added explanation. So just an understanding from your part that that is why they might respond in this way. That is not necessarily they're responding this way because of you, but they're responding because of the circumstances that they're surrounding them. Still, that does not give them the justification to act a certain way. And then if the response seems excessive, um, use it as a warning sign and learn to pay attention to both the verbal and nonverbal cues. One of the things that I mentioned at the beginning is that safety should be the most important things for everybody. So if your gut feeling is telling you that the situation might escalate even more, or that it's going to be unlikely that you're going to be able to diffuse the situation, listen to your gut instinct. And that might be a time when you want to bring in other people in the conversation. Okay. Um, so the first thing, any questions so far? Great. So the first thing that we really want to focus on is communication. Communication is the number one tool that you have at your disposal to diffuse conflict. Okay. the first thing to establish is whether or not you're going to be able to communicate with a person. Okay. Are there language barriers? Are the person experiencing symptoms of mental health like delusion, hallucinations? They're hearing voices. That's going to complicate your ability to communicate with them. So one way to start the communication is to ask very simple and straightforward questions. Okay, and pay attention to what the response is. If you ask a simple questions like, what can I do for you? And they're not able to articulate that, that should be an indication. If they're so angry that your safety is jeopardized at all, again, pay attention to that and make sure that you either have somebody else with you or that you have somebody ready to call additional support if you need. So really gauge whether or not you're able to engage in a safe communication with the individual. If communication is possible, really try to reduce stimuli as much as you possibly can, right? Definitely what we know, if it's a person is yelling and screaming and they have an audience, they're more likely to continue to yell and scream. There is something that happened about having people watching and paying attention that increase the stress of the person. So whenever possible, don't carry the conversation by a counter. Say, can we come here and sit on the corner? Can I offer you a glass of water? Wherever you think it can kind of make the situation a little more comfortable, but always keep safety in mind, right? So I definitely wouldn't go in a place where nobody has eyes on you. If you have a coworker, you can kind of be in a corner, but the coworker can look at you. Be respectful and polite. That's really hard, right? Because when somebody is calling you name or yelling or screaming or just having posturing or being aggressive, it's really difficult to maintain respect and be polite. And also always allow a reasonable period for the person to tell their story and to tell you what the problem is. Really listen to them, what they're saying. One rule of thumb is that if you're already thinking at a question to ask them while they're telling your story, is that you're not really listening to what's going on. Sometimes you have to read in between the line because the person is not able to express what the issue really is. Continue to ask simple question, ask clarifying question. If you don't understand something, just go ahead and say, okay, can you repeat that? I want to make sure that I understand what you're asking. Try to really eliminate distraction and really focus on the conversation. So, if don't have somebody come in and interrupt you, don't look at your phone, don't answer your phone. So really focus on the person and never, ever, ever assume that you know what they're asking. That's why it's always useful to repeat and say, and if I'm saying something wrong, if this is not what you're looking for, please correct them. You kind of want to give them the space for them to really tell you their story. That tends to really de-escalate people quickly because most of the time what people are looking for is to be heard, right? Something has happened for which they feel that people are not listening to them, their emotion were not taken in consideration, people disrespect them somehow. So for you, just the fact that you're giving them your time and your attention will inherently de-escalate the situation. These are the main two things that I like for you to remember out of communication is that one, reasoning with an angry person is not possible, okay? Which means that you might have very good valid point on why the person shouldn't be able, why, I'll simplify an example. Let's say that the person orders something and the way they wanted to do it was not possible. So you might have really good reason on why say we couldn't do this. But in the moment when a person is angry, you're not going to be able to explain to them or have them understand why what they wanted done did not happen. Okay, so the first thing that you have to do, you have to calm the person down so that then um, you can explain to them exactly what happened. Okay, and the other thing is that de-escalation tactics really go against normal instinct. We generally, when somebody is yelling at you, our instinct is to yell back. Our instinct is at least to match the same tone and level of voice that the other person has. Instead, we have to do the opposite. So if a person comes to you angry and agitated, we actually have to talk to them very calmly, very softly, because chances are that if we do that, they'll match our tone. And so if instead of having us going angry, angrier, angry, angrier, we're able to go angry, calmer and slower, they're gonna come down and then we're gonna come down and you're gonna get to a place where you're gonna be able to have a conversation. And that is not easy. That's not an easy thing to do. So it takes practice. So often one of the suggestions that I give people, and a suggestion that I take myself, is that I don't answer instinctively to somebody. I take really a few seconds, and sometimes all you need is like 10, 15 seconds to really say, okay, this person is not upset at me, is upset at the situation. What can I do to help them? When we're talking about the escalation techniques, really there are um, two things that you need to take in consideration. Not only your verbal techniques, but your non-verbal techniques, right? So your verbal techniques are your tone of voice, how loud you are, the sound of your voice. You're really listening to the person. Repetition is key. Something happened with repetition that inherently calm us down. So that's important. And be clear in what you're asking the person to do or not to do. But you also have to be aware of your nonverbal technique, your body language. You know, if you're talking calmly with somebody, but you're very like defensive in your stand, or maybe you have your arm crossed, that does not allow for a connection to happen. If you're standing with your fist clenched, that is not inherently makes the person feel comfortable. Your facial expression, okay? Somebody might be telling you something and you might not believe what they're saying. Make sure that your facial expression, that you have control over it, that is not necessarily showing what you're experiencing. And allow for personal space. Don't crowd the person, don't corner the person, allow for them, and also for you to have enough personal space to maintain safety, right? If you need to jump, behind the counter, or if you need, make sure that you're always within the reach of an exit door, and maintain eye contact. I think it's important that people know that you're seeing them, not just hearing them, but you're seeing them. And by maintaining the eye contact, you actually can see what is happening with them. Are they calming down? Are they escalating more? So that is important. And anytime you have eye contact, it makes people feel heard. So eye contact is a big one. Any questions so far? Okay. Another thing is that when you're engaging in a conversation with somebody, you have to stay present in the moment and focus with them. Listen to what they're asking for. If you're not sure, ask. I remember, and this is an example of when I started my career many, many, many years ago. Probably shouldn't age myself, but I've been in the field for almost 25 years now. And I had a person that was experiencing suicidal ideation, and I had talked to him for maybe 20 minutes. I couldn't break through. There was no connection. It was really focused on his suicidal ideation, and a little bit out of desperation. I was really, really young back then. I said, are you hungry? and it turned out that the person had not eaten in 2 days. Okay. So by just providing a little snack, I was able to connect on a different way. And then the conversation started going, okay, what can we do to get you safe? So sometimes keep in mind that people escalate because their basic needs are not met. Okay. And so it's always worth to ask very simple questions. There are certain things that you want to avoid at all costs, and power struggle is one of them. This is where you might want to use a team approach, maybe ask assistance from a coworker or somebody else that is there. There are 7 billion people in this world. We cannot connect with all of them. So if for some reason you're not getting anywhere with a person, it's worth to bring somebody else and see if they connect better with that person. And that is absolutely not an indication of you failing at de-escalating the situation or you not being a good talker. It's just happened that with that person, there is not connection. So that's why we often go out in team when we respond to crisis emergency, because some people respond better, with females. Some people respond better with males. Some people respond better with, a police officer rather than a therapist. So whatever it is that can make a connection, recognize that and don't take it personal. Always, always use positive self-talk. There is no need to bring more negativity in already unstable situation. And set limits and give choices. Sometimes they might not like the choices that you have, but nevertheless, those are the choices that they have. And it can be, listen, I can sit here for 15 more minutes with you and we can finish this conversation. Or if you prefer, you can call in later and talk to my supervisor, or I can have my supervisor call you. The other situation can be, I really would love to talk to you, but we have to take this one outside. I'm not going to be able to have this conversation with you inside. Really, again, whatever choices you need to give to the situation to make it safe and bring it to an end is things to think about. And always, always, always debrief. Debrief with the supervisor, debrief with a colleague. Stressful situation need to find an outlet where people are able to share their feeling. Otherwise, they kind of gonna festering you. And should there be another, high intensity situation, you might not be able to handle it as well. Ian, I see you.
Hey, I do want to ask another question. And as I mentioned, Valentina and I were able to give this presentation last week, and we got a question that I want to share. And is it okay to engage with somebody who has a mental illness? So I'm not a trained professional, and the person who I'm speaking with, obviously, or not obvious, it seems to me in my untrained eyes that there is a mental situation. I mean, is it okay for me to try?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, safety comes first, right? So again, pay attention to that instinct, pay attention to your surrounding. So if you feel safe, it's absolutely okay to engage respectfully in a conversation with someone that has mental health. It's not a crime to have mental health. People experience depression, anxiety, a lot more than we think. And also people have hallucination or delusions a lot more often than we think. Now, the secret is that you do not want to antagonize anybody. So you can ask them, what can I do to help you, right? And if it's something that you can do, go ahead and do it. But if it's something that you cannot, be honest, say, I'm really sorry, that is not something I can do, but let me find somebody that can, and that might be a good time to call, me on scene, or call law enforcement on scene, or anybody else. But as long as you're respectful, and truly genuine and caring, absolutely you can engage in a conversation. There is a misconception that most people have around mental health is that people who have mental health are violent. They really are not. I think most people that are experiencing severe mental health symptoms are just scared and they're just looking for help. So as long as you keep that in mind, yes, it's okay for you to engage with somebody that has mental health. Now, if at any point or even at the beginning they are threatening to you or you perceive that you're being threatened, you don't have to. Okay. And so that's when you can call somebody else in. Safety should always be your number one for you and everybody involved in the situation. This is really fun. So I love tacos. So I thought that this will be appropriate. But these are other things to remember to avoid. And then we can all have tacos for lunch. But it's like never threaten somebody, never argue with somebody is not worth your time, especially with somebody that might be experiencing delusion. Um, don't trying to change their mind. It's not going to happen for one, so it's not worth your time. And also never challenge the person, order the person to do things. Instead, like we talked about before, give them option. Again, you get to set what the two options are, but they are empowered by choosing. They might not like either one of them, but they still have a choice. And don't shame, ridicule them, make fun of them, or point things out, because that is only going to increase their hostility toward you. These are a few more additional things to keep in mind. You heard me say it several times. I will say it until the day. Safety should be the number one priority for everyone. At the end of the day, everybody wants to be safe. Nobody wants to hurt anybody. So if at any point don't feel safe, that would be a good time to call the police. You're dealing with human behavior, which can be unpredictable. Even if you think that you know what the reaction of the person is going to be, don't assume that. I've been surprised many, many times. And also, don't be surprised if you like de-escalate the situation and then they get upset again because maybe somebody says the wrong word. So just because the situation calm down at first, still pay attention of what the reaction is. Trust your gut feeling. If you feel the hair on the back of your neck, if you feel that things in your stomach or in your throat, whatever you feel it that is telling you, oh, things are not right, pay a little more attention to your surrounding. Make sure that the person is not abruptly moving, that does not have access to things that can be used as a weapon, things like that. And you don't have to do it alone. So this is probably the number one thing that I tell people all the time. If you have a coworker with you, if you have somebody that is passing by, but if you can call somebody to come out, absolutely. We have so many ways to get a hold of police, mental health provider here in Clackamas County. Some of them have a really short response. If I'm available, my response is about 4 minutes, which I understand can be and feel really long, but I can be on scene pretty quickly. There is also an hesitation sometimes to call the police because there's the assumption that if police get involved, somebody's going to end up in jail. Well, that is not the case at all. Sometimes police comes and what they're able to do and what I'm able to do is connect the person to the services that they need. So we try to avoid jail or the hospital whenever it is possible. So it's not always a bad thing to call the police or have the police come in. Recognizing that sometimes, there's nothing that neither myself or the police can do. Some people are just going to have a bad day. They're going to scream and yell, and then they're going to go on their way. And that doesn't feel particularly good. but that's not quite a crime. And so there are other solution is calling like the crisis line. Here in Clackamas County, we have Clackamas County Behavioral Health that has a 24/7 crisis line. They also have a mobile response team, right? So should I not be available, or should the, immediately they can come out of response. The response time is a little bit longer. But don't hesitate to call non-emergency, or if it is an emergency, 911, of course, or the crisis line with any question that you might have. It might even work that the situation de-escalate and the person leaves, and then you might want to call the crisis line just to debrief. If you're alone in there, you can just call to debrief. Yeah.
Can you remind people what the crisis number is?
Yes. And I will, yes. And this afternoon, I will also bring card to City Hall for you guys to have some. But the Clackamas County crisis line is 503-655-8585. And that is a number that is answered 24/7. And that is also like a walking, like Monday through Saturday from 9 to 6 is a walking clinic that you might direct people to. The cards that I'm going to give you actually are going to have their addresses as well. Any other question? Okay. Yeah.
This is John Lewis. It was just so much of our conflict that we experience happens at the counter. Folks are, they're citizens, probably have a justification for being pretty upset about whether it be fees or process or conditions or outcomes of their work, things like that. And so oftentimes they come in and they're pretty loud in a space that's not really needed to be loud. Sometimes I get the impression some people are just loud, I guess, when they get excited. Other people seems like they're looking for an audience. And the idea of diffusing that, I guess, sometimes I want folks to know that, I don't work well under those conditions, just letting them know that, that we recognize they're upset, and then trying to get them to move into a conference room or something like that. And some employees might be uncomfortable with that just because, it all of a sudden takes you away from everybody else. But I don't know, I found that helps a little bit to be able to sit down, first of all, put them in a room where you're kind of fully engaged. And I don't know how many other people have dealt with that, but we get a lot of that kind of stuff, Val. It's at least where I've noted, that's where a lot of our conflict happens, is really at the front counter.
I think, John, you bring a good point. First of all, I should have said that at the beginning. There are certain things that really are gonna fuel people, and it's money and their children, right? Doesn't matter what's going on in their life, people will always fight for their money and their children. So, but one of the things that might allow for the person to calm down, especially if they're loud, especially if they are agitated, is for you to show a little vulnerability. And I often say, wow, I really want to talk to you, but your tone and how loud you are, it kind of makes me feel uncomfortable. It's kind of making me, it scares me. Is there any way that we can bring that down? And it's unbelievable how much just pointing out something like this, again, in a very respectful way, bring the person's like, well, yeah, of course, because I want you to hear what I have to say. And if you are able to take him into a different room, that's great. But do things like leave the door open, let somebody else know that you're going to be in the room, and maybe just say right by the door of that room, you can sit down, by the door. sometimes just offering, can I get you a glass of water? You know, might tone the person down as well. So really, distraction is an art form that if you master it can be extremely helpful. But yeah, John, well said. It at any point, if you can take them away from the situation and the audience, absolutely. Anybody else? Well, I also want to say that I am available. You know, my phone number is actually in the next slide. Hold on. Maybe. Like I said, I'm not super. Here we go. There, my email is here. My phone number is here. If you have any question, if you have any concern, please don't hesitate to contact me. Now, if it's an emergency, don't try to call me on my desk. I'm often not on my desk, and I would hate for you to be in an emergency and I cannot get to you for like a couple of hours. I'm often in the field. But so if it truly is an emergency, 911 is the place for you to call. But if you have any other question, even if you want to talk a specific situation, even if you want to debrief about something that has happened to you, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Any other comments? Any other like things that anybody wants to share?
I just will share again. Thank you for putting this together, Val. We decided to reach out to you and offer this available to staff and some of the businesses in downtown because there had been a few instances right after Labor Day, and there were some business owners that perhaps had had some experiences and were feeling a little uncomfortable, and they had reached out to the city and had reached out to the Downtown Oregon City Association. So that's what got the ball rolling to have this here. And I think because of the pandemic and situations related to wearing masks and there's been, as we all know, a lot of high emotions in the last
and we didn't even
months.
address we didn't even address the fact that emotions are high because of the pandemic. Just to talk a little bit about very briefly, but how people are triggered, right? So every time that we experience an event, a strong event, we have a response to it. But generally, time goes by between events that we're able to process and get things out of our system so that we're ready to another event. Did I?
You may have turned off your camera.
Oh, it's like I didn't turn it off. It's just my apologies. My camera just went off on its own, and now I don't have the little tiny icon. So I hope you can guys still hear me. But so what we have experienced though in this past couple of years, 18 months, is one, we're in a pandemic. We had racial discord, we had ice storm, we had fire. It was back to back to back, really stressful situation. So people are kind of at their limit, and that's why it's very likely that their reactions are they're exaggerated, and that they're like really responding because people are exasperated. So keep that in mind, and if you can, come from a place of a compassion and empathy, definitely. I really don't know what I did. I'm looking at my little thing, but it doesn't. So my apologies. Oh, there it is. There it is. Sorry. It's just one of those things that appear and disappears. So, John, it looked like you had your hand up. Did you have a question?
No, I was just, it was like a thank you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I know Chief Band calls you Val.
Yes.
Is you like Val, or is it Val? Do you like Valentina?
Val is just fine. It's, Valentina's Val is perfectly fine. I actually prefer that. So, and I
Okay.
really, really stress, I'm here, I'm available. Don't hesitate to contact me with anything. And if you need, that one thing that we didn't talk about is how you get a hold of me. So the best way to get a hold of me, it is through dispatch, right? Because they have like a direct, no matter what, a direct access to me. They always know where I'm at. So you can do it to call 911. If police show up, they generally are very good at calling me, so I can show up as well. But if you call non-emergency and ask for the behavioral health specialist, the call comes to me, and if I'm available, I'm happy to show up on scene. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for spending this morning with me. I really appreciate it, and for you guys giving me this opportunity. And yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Val. We appreciate it very much. And again, we'll have those cards that have the county non-emergency line and the dispatch number that'll be available at City Hall.
This afternoon, sometimes, get on my way. Yeah.
All right. So, all right. Well, many thanks to you. All right. I hope everyone else has the rest of the day. And again, you can let your coworkers know that this will be available. I can send a link to anyone who would like to watch this presentation. All right.
Thank you. Bye.